This is Beatwalla, serving up the stories behind the beats and taking you straight to the soul of exceptional artists, as we sit down every week to unravel what fuels their artistic expression and creation, here on Beatwalla, with me, Jo Youle. Today we're in the temporary Ibiza residence of a musician who seeks out spaces in which self-expression, rediscovery and human connection can prosper. Each concert is uniquely its own, and his concerts span the corners of our planet in constant search for the next location to call home. He's also co-founder of global hospitality brand Habitas and facilitator of the Overview Effect. Eduardo Castillo, thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Thank you for having me.
I think a lot of creativity comes from conflict or instability or circumstantial unrest, and I wonder, growing up in Venezuela, is that something that you experienced? Is that why you got into music, maybe?
Yeah, in Venezuela, I left early. I left when I was 18. I did leave to pursue a career in music. Some things happened, and some tragic experiences happened before my 18 years, and I had to sort of figure out life very quickly. And so I actually sent some cassette tapes to some universities in the US and got a scholarship, and ended up in Miami. From there, I went to New York to pursue a career in opera, and somehow always related to my time in Venezuela in that I had much freedom in Venezuela, and there was conflict happened after I left, really. It was more the freedom that I had in Venezuela that sort of changed my way in a career in music, because I wanted to be a free musician. Opera is not so much. It's a beautiful career, but it's very, 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 very disciplined and strict. And I'm a disciplined person, but I wanted to have it all. I wanted to experience jazz in a smoky night jazz club in New York. I wanted to experience techno in a nightclub in New York City. And just moved to New York City, and it was just like this plethora of late 90s was an explosion of music in every genre. So I left opera aside, and I remember thinking in that moment of like, what was my childhood like? Like, I want to live like that, with obviously more responsibilities, but that's how I relate to Venezuela. And Venezuela, actually the conflict came after. And yes, I agree with you, creativity sometimes flourishes in conflict and in turmoil, but I feel blessed to not have been in the thick of that in Venezuela. And in fact, my goal now is to go back to Venezuela and to bring all the learnings that I've kind of put together in this chest of experiences, and actually put them to work in Venezuela. And Venezuela is opening up now slowly. Politically, it's still a disaster, but people have just sort of said, who cares about politics? Let's survive. Let's make a living. Let's work. Let's figure this out. And so there's a lot of opening doors that are happening there, particularly in tourism, which is tourism and entertainment. And I'm very excited for the prospect of bringing something unique and important to Venezuela with a very clear objective, which is the Overview Effect.
Which musical moment was the one that you probably thought during your time in opera that, I want to do something else? Is there one experience that you had in New York that really made you think, I need to get into a less strict environment musically?
It was when I was vocalizing with my voice coach, who was very expensive and incredible. And I think it was like I was bartending at the time also to make a living, and I showed up to class exhausted, tired. My voice was super tired, and I was, there's a piano and there's middle C. That's the basically the C notes in the middle of the piano, and for a tenor, which I was, you kind of I am, I guess, but not really practicing. So you kind of meander up north of middle C, and that's where your voice is called the passaggio. That's where you start really kind of engaging your diaphragm and really focusing on your technique, because you're starting to get into a range that you need that power. And I was flat. I was just like, I tried to sing, and he would take me back down to bring me back up, and I would kind of like rev up and it just wasn't happening. I had a really, really fatigued voice. And he sat me down. It was an incredible moment because he sat me down. He's like, let's talk about your career. Let's talk about what you want to do. I know your heart's in it. I know your mind's in it, but you have, you're working, you're in a different situation. And I was really at that point kind of working just to pay these classes. I mean, it was a big deal, and I really wanted to have a career in opera. But a lot of things changed in that moment because he was like, let's think about this, because what do you want to do? And he sat me down next to the piano, and we started talking about it. And I said to him, I don't want to just do one thing, and I feel this commitment to something because in academics I studied singing, and it was fun, and it wasn't to make a living. It was just like, and it was also not, it was sometimes dark and obscure and interesting. And I always related to a baritone role rather than a tenor role. The baritone was sort of like this kind of edgy guy who questioned life more. The tenor was always the prince, and always like, they had all the beautiful ladies and the princesses, and especially in Italian opera. And so there was obviously, some depth to the tenor roles, but really the baritone was like the interesting guy for me, and the bass. And that wasn't my voice. I was always a tenor. And so in school, I actually got to sing really interesting roles. There's some really like avant-garde roles that the tenor was this kind of interesting character. But he was training me for the classics. He was training me for a career in opera, and I had to sing the classics. Puccini, Verdi, the Italian operas, which to me felt like soap operas. They're beautiful music, and they're beautiful compositions, and they're maestros, they're geniuses, these composers. But the plot and how I related to that character was kind of superficial to me. Some other tenor might say you're insane, right? But that's just how it felt at the time, and I have a different appreciation for it now. But at that moment, I thought, this is not for me. And he said, well, let's make a choice. Like, take a few weeks off, and let's figure this out, and come back to me and give me an idea of what you want to do. And when he said that, he just basically said, like, go, be free. And so I spent 2 weeks thinking about it. I also studied composition, studied philosophy and religion as well. So there was this sort of like, and even thinking back, I probably never would have gotten a degree. I would have just gone to a teacher and be an apprentice, like the old days, where you're immersed in it right away. So I went back to him 2 weeks later, and I thought, and I told him, I want to be a well-rounded musician, and I want to learn about jazz in a dark, grimy club. I want to learn about electronic music. I want to, be in Broadway. I want to like be exposed to everything and not think that I have to focus on one thing. And he said, congratulations, this is the future. This is your future, and go for it. And if you ever need some coaching, I'm here. But opera is not what you should be pursuing. And I said, you're right, it's not. And so it was a beautiful moment. Yeah.
Didn't expect you to say that, but that's very amazing that you can be so humble about it and look back on it with that lens, because I guess that's a very different trajectory that your life then kind of went upon. And where did you go from there?
From there, I kind of deployed my compositional skills, and I started reaching out to friends who were in that world for music for TV, film. I wrote a few ballets. I wrote a few off-Broadway shows. I wrote a few TV things. Did some work with Showtime at the time, back in the day. And then I was running a lounge, and I was hiring DJs. But this was all when vinyl. It was all vinyl. There was no CDs, or it was just vinyl. And I was kind of enamored by this idea of playing music with records, and playing records and DJing, basically. And so I would stay late nights with DJs and just grab their records and practice. And I started DJing in the city, and the DJing became a pretty big deal, until I realized that it was an industry that was just a bit too ego driven. And so I wanted to kind of really focus on music and really focus on creating experiences. I kept DJing, and I kept creating these experiences in LA and New York and Miami. But they were curated by me. They were, I was the resident DJ in essence, and so I would have guests, and it was a beautiful experience. And that sort of, I left New York, moved to LA to pursue a career in music in that realm, and the puppy. I pursued to pursue a career in music in that realm.
I'd like to bring you back to something you said, which is that you feel like DJs had too much ego, and why why do you think that is?
I didn't want to one the nature of the business, like the travel, the constant, like to me, for me personally, to go to play a show on a Friday, to arrive like right before the show, play the show. Typically what you do is you arrive, you have dinner with the promoter, you play the show. The next day you get on a flight, you go and you do it all over again. And I tried that for like 2 months, and I thought, wow, I'm not connecting with anybody. I don't know what these cultures are, and here I am having like the blessing of being able to travel the world and not connecting with any cultures, like truly, because I'm just in and out. And I really had this sense of like, wow, I'm really missing out on something here, because I connected with people musically. Dance floors were beautiful, but like, I don't want to go yet, And luckily, and at a very, very, very young age, I realized that I could never use music as my livelihood, because it would bite me in the ass. Like to have to take a gig because I had to pay rent or because I had to have food on my table. When I say ego, I talk about, it's an industry that's difficult for me, because it really is. There was a moment also where I realized that DJing other people's music was actually, for me, I was borrowing their music. And so many people would come to me and say, wow, I love your music. I love your music. I love your music. And I would constantly have to say, I'm just borrowing. It's not my music. It's, and if there's anything that you want, I can share it with you, whatever, and I would personally take pictures. Like people would come up to me like, oh my God, what is this song? And I would take a picture of it and say, like, here it is, while I'm DJing. And I've been lucky also to be friends with DJs that have a very big career, have very, very big careers, that were always like this. We're always sharing, and, and also gave me so much of their music to experiment with and learn back in the day. But that's so more the exception than the rule. And so I realized that I was that as a career, DJing wasn't really hitting the mark for me. I needed to get back to my roots and to be more truthful in the way that I was performing and experiencing music. But now really my real expression musically is through my live shows, which is my music. And it's authentic because it's a platform for really expressing. Now when somebody says, I loved your music, I can say thank you. I can actually say thank you. That means a lot to me. Before it was thank you, I'll let the person who wrote the music know, which I was happy to do, but it feels different.
I kind of first came across your work was through a mutual friend of ours, Sebastian, who is, of course, Hush Forever. I just wanted to, find out, for starters, like how you guys met.
We met through another common friend, another Sebastian, Swedish dear friend, incredible producer, who I invited to Mexico. I've been following his work for a really long time, big fan of his, and finally we connected and invited him to Mexico. And he then said, I'd love to bring Sebastian, Hush Forever, with me to sort of create this trifecta of music exploration. And we did that 2 years ago, just after the lockdown and COVID. And it was beautiful. And Sebastian is an incredible human. Both of them are. And I actually invited both to Ibiza this time around. But the original Sebastian couldn't travel. He was too busy. And Sebastian was readily available to come. And he spent some time with his family and had a show. And him and I worked on this really beautiful song that we created together. I sent him music for the title track, what would become the title track of my new album. And I sent him the entire piece written and recorded, and asked him to just lay his voice on it because he has an incredible, super raw and beautiful voice. And so he did that, and what he did blew my mind and validated really why it is that we work really well together. We see music in the same way, we feel music in the same way, and he actually improvised a lyric on the song where the verse and the chorus says "It's all happening," and that actually became the name of the album, because that's sort of how I feel life is right now, where everything is happening just right now at once.
That wasn't the original name though. The name came from Arabic, so maybe you can kind of explain a little bit why you had to change that.
Yeah, so the original name of the album was Tarab, which is an Arabic word that essentially, in one word, like many languages, sometimes languages have one word that describe what in another language would be an entire paragraph. Tarab speaks directly to the ecstasy of existing in music, or being enveloped in music, and what that does to your soul, to your emotions, and it's all kind of wrapped in one word. I really wanted to use that word, but when we published the album, we realized that Tarab, there was a technical issue with where Tarab had to be written in Arabic rather than in English, and that would make it complicated for anybody who's following my music to find. So I was sort of in this little limbo stage of what do I call this album, because it's an album that really encapsulates a lot of where I am musically. And suddenly Sebastian sent me the song with the words, and that became the title track of the song, because I hear it every day, and it's just really uplifting for me. I think, I don't know if this works this way, but I think algorithmically in searches, the longer the song is in play, the longer it's out there, the faster it pops up. I'm sure there's a ton of It's-All Happenings on the web, so...
A lot of podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
I think the word Tarab probably is like a blanket word that can be used to encapsulate, I think, what happens on Ibiza in the summer.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think so. For it, very different levels, which is what's cool about Ibiza. You can have this crazy club experience, which, is its own world, and then you have this beautiful, organic and more cultural experience, which is, I mean, they're both cultural in their own right, but yes, I mean, Tarab is a beautiful word, and I hope to, figure out a way to make it happen one day, because it just encapsulates so much of what happens with my experience in music and what I want people to experience when they listen to mine.
I mean, obviously you provided and composed that piece of music, and Sebastian put his lyric to it, but you were quite specific he was about his kind of feeling when he recorded those lyrics, or what that inspired within him, the kind of feeling of open-heartedness, and how can you...
That's so funny. The original name of the song was Open Heart, and that's basically when I recorded it and I listened back to it, and many times that's exactly what it did. It just opened my heart. And I sent it to him with that title, but he didn't. I don't think he even. Maybe he didn't notice it, and we haven't talked about it with him about that. But he just sang what he felt, and what he felt was exactly. It was his lyric was define the song better, and I realized that that's actually what the song was about. It's your heart is open because there's a sense of satisfaction, fulfillment. And it made sense to call it It's All Happening, because it just makes sense. When you hear it, I think you'll understand.
I think what was very interesting for me is that there's been a haunting piece of music that has provided the backdrop to some dark moments, I would say, probably like during lockdown, specifically. I think when obviously we were all a little bit restricted in our usual day-to-day doings, and I've heard it many times since then. in yoga classes and on the island in various places and spaces. And it wasn't until I went to your website today and did a bit more research and I realized it's actually your song, Love Song. And I had really no idea that was coming from you, because it was under a slightly different moniker.
Mar de Leva, yeah. Mar de Leva was a project I created essentially to travel the world and invite musicians of that culture to improvise, which is where I feel I thrive the most is in improvisation. And so there are two wonderful musicians in Tulum, where I live, that I wanted to work with and kind of kick this off with, and we really clicked, and it really made sense. And so we did a few studio sessions, and then I produced these songs out of that moniker. Love Song is exactly that. It's love song. It's a love song to everything. It's not to a partner, to the planet, to existence, to gratitude. That's all it is. It just spews love. And that was a situation where in studio, the singer Mati really embodied it, and really took it on.
I mean, can you tell us a bit more about the singer? Because obviously I don't understand the lyrics, because obviously I've listened to it thousands of times, but I still have no idea what's being sung.
Certainly. This is one of the things that I love about music as well, is how you cross paths with unique individuals. And he was introduced to me in Tulum. He's Argentinian. He was introduced to me in Tulum, and I heard him sing, but I heard him sing from afar. And I didn't realize, I thought this must be probably an African man in his 60s, just had that quality of the voice. And then I saw, and he was a young Argentinian, good-looking kid. And that's when I asked him to come on board and be part of this trio. And what he does is he just sings. He creates melodies. He's a wonderful melody weaver, and then he just starts enunciating sounds that sound like words, but they're not. It's just gibberish.
That makes you feel better that I can understand
you don't understand it, right? Exactly. And I get that question all the time. What language is this? And my reply is that it comes from a deep kind of place of singing, really honing in on your craft, and the words are made up. Much like Sigur Rós, for instance, John Z, the singer of Sigur Rós, I had the same thing. I was like, wow, this language, this must be like an Icelandic, like this,
Eskimo talk.
Yeah, what's going on here? And then I saw him in the video. He's like, oh, I'm just gibbering. Like, I'm just creating gibberish, and I'm not really saying anything. But there's something special to that as well. Yeah.
Very, very special. I mean, yeah, I could listen to that song. And there's a lot of songs that you listen to more than a couple of times and they get boring, but I'm not bored, and we're like 4 years in.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful.
I mean, you talk about improvising and this idea of inviting people to obviously collaborate on your music. It doesn't sound like perhaps maybe your intention is to be the lead vocalist on the music that you make.
No, I'm sort of the conductor of the orchestra, and I'm obviously do a lot of composing, and I have a lot of material when I perform. But when I bring musicians in, they've never heard that music before. And so when I start triggering sounds and textures and melodies and harmonies, I sing as well. But in a very open space. The music can take any direction. Obviously, it's in a key structure. Let's say, I'll tell the musicians on stage when we're performing, I'll say, this is an E minor, or this is C major, or whatever it is that the scale is. And then they just listen as I kind of start developing and texturing and painting. And then they start voicing, and they start throwing in their talents and at the end of the day, what I love most about this is instilling or invoking a really strong sense of sensibility, of really listening. And I often, when I invite musicians on stage, we all hug, and I say, let's listen. Let's just listen. When we're playing, the audience is listening, but I always try to invoke that idea of let's really listen to each other. And it's magical. It's incredible when everybody aligns and there's so much space in the music to allow yourself to create. You know, it's not rigid. There's not a verse, chorus. People are just sort of in this constant trance, these musicians. So I'm working now with incredible musicians in Ibiza, a guitarist named Camilo Nu, who's just a gypsy who just eats up the guitar and really has an incredible sensibility to African Saharan like blues, which I absolutely adore. That's full trance music, you know, like real trance, not nightclub trance, like real trance. Oh, like it comes from there, I guess.
It came from Goa, the hippies.
Yeah, the trance does, yeah. But it really, this trance-like state is to me the most beautiful music. That's the kind of love song thing where you can just listen to it forever. He's incredible on that. I have Mati Fabre, another Mati, Argentinian as well, who I met through the other Mati. And he brings this plethora of electronic texture, incredible producer, very, very sophisticated ear, and just knows how to tap into. And him and I, our computers are linked together. So it's like this, we're just like throwing like a ball at each other. You know, it's really, really fun. And then I have Reka Fodor, who's this just powerhouse woman of ancestral sounds. She's also an operatic singer, a soprano, and it goes in from, you know, hitting these beautiful soprano registers to like very raw and like guttural, visceral, you know, I'm here kind of thing, which is incredible to have on stage. Having a woman, that feminine presence on stage is priceless. So that's sort of the, if I would say, you know, I'm not calling it Mar de Leva anymore, but it's sort of that. It's and Mar de Leva is a beautiful term, actually. Mar de Leva is the confluence of 3 ocean currents colliding in the ocean. It's an oceanography term, and when they collide, these 3 currents, regardless of where they came from, create a new current that goes in one direction, and it's 10 times more powerful. And that's why I created this concept of Mar de Leva, is to bring these different currents in to create one big one. That's what's happening with this team right now. It's the family of music that's incredible.
You've got a bit of a history of working in the operatic world.
Wow. That was beautiful.
That was timely.
It was like, I think it was like a C sharp that we heard. That was awesome.
Well, actually, I was going to refer to the fact that we are already in the midst of a giant Ibiza orchestra with the crickets, because if you've ever watched footage of how this communication system works when it's slowed all the way down, it is actually like an orchestra. It's
incredible. And some people are like, it's incredible when it shuts off. That's when you realize, wow. And that's a really important part also with improvising in music, is I often talk to the audience and musicians on how probably the most important are the rest between the notes. It's that space that then allows you to understand and digest sort of what just happened. And it's very much like that. Like there's a time in the day when all of a sudden this shuts off and you're like, oh my God, it's incredible.
I used to, teach yoga in a beautiful retreat house in San Vicente, and, you know, suddenly just right at the very end of the class, just in time for Shavasana, the world would go quiet. And as you say, you don't realize how enveloped you are and immersed in that sound until it stops. And then it's quite dramatic.
It is very dramatic. Same thing happens with music. There's moments where I end a song and maybe for 5 minutes, there's silence. There's no applause. It's just like hot, like really digesting, you know, like really kind of coming to terms with what we just experienced together. It's incredible. It's such a blessing to be able to experience that for me.
Beautiful. I think, well, I can imagine at your Habitas environments, I've seen, you know, beautiful imagery, particularly of Sebastian's gig when I first noticed you guys doing something together, and that space just kind of lends itself to listening. And I think it's an art that is kind of lost in this lifetime, seemingly.
Yeah, I think so. I've always really enjoyed going into spaces where I was immersed in something, and it could just be a fireplace, you know, it could just be candles, but there was a sense of containment that to me was also, you know, I remember in like 1992 I went to see a Peter Gabriel concert, and that changed. That, you know, I felt like a kid when, you know, the kid like says, "I want to be an astronaut." I was like, I want to be like him. I want to do what he does. And you know, I arrived at the concert, and the first people that I encountered was this massive army of Human Rights Watch. You know, and it was like Amnesty International, and it was like, what is this? What immediately there was a sense of purpose. And I hadn't heard the first note. I was obviously a fan of Peter Gabriel's. That was my first concert that I seen him. It was in Caracas, in Venezuela. And I walked in, and there was like seeing all these Venezuelans, you know, at my age, young kids, being part of the Peter Gabriel experience. Yet, you know, these were worlds apart, but it was all working to a common cause, which was Amnesty International. And I remember thinking very, very clearly and vividly, I was like, this is what has to happen with this power. There was maybe 40,000 people there, and I was like, this is incredible how music has to have a purpose. I've always been against, you know, artists that say, I'm an artist, I'm not involved in politics, and I don't agree to that. And I think it's important there is a neutrality that's important, so that everybody has access to your thought, and you know, and there's no more confusion created. But I think it's important to have a voice, and you know, and if it's based on human values, it should happen. And that was my first experience with that. And so creating experiences that are within the right context, like our hotels. Obviously, I have my dear business partner and brother to thank, because he's a big part of that. He's the kind of guy who is just a master with logistics and problem solving, and he allows me to just explore creatively, which is an incredible balance to have. Very lucky to have that.
You talk about wanting to, you know, after seeing Peter, you wanted to be an astronaut, and that's kind of, you know, a deep part of the concept of the overview effect, this idea of, you know, overviewing, you know, from Earth and experiencing that whole kind of deeper perspective. I mean, do you want to get into what the concept of this creation that you've brought to the island is this summer?
For sure. This summer, the series that I've created this summer in Ibiza has been focused on this overview effect, which to me, the overview effect is all encompassing. It was coined by an incredible human called Frank White, author, philosopher, been interviewing astronauts forever. And he wrote a book called The Overview Effect, coined the term. And essentially it's talking to astronauts and understanding what happens to them when they see Earth from space. They shoot up through space, G-force, intense experience, physical, technical. They shoot through the atmosphere, and I've had conversations with astronauts about this as well since I fell in love with this idea. And they all say the same thing, that, you know, they go through this technical process of making sure they're okay, everything's good, all the gauges, all the controls are perfect, and then all of a sudden they have a moment of like, okay, I can take a breath now, I'm alive, we got through it. And they float in zero gravity, then float towards a window and see planet Earth, and then everything changes. The cognitive shift that happens then, as Frank describes it and astronauts describe it, is profound, and it's life-changing, transformational. So I feel the overview effect it applies to everything, and it's non-dogmatic, and it's, you know, as you know, Buddhism could have been that, or Christianity or Catholicism, Judaism, they all became what they are, and, you know, religion is religion. So this idea of an all-encompassing moment in everyone's life, in human existence, of realizing, seeing something and not being able to unsee it, you know, having that in you, having that innately, having the responsibility of saying, oh wow, okay, things change now, I can't go back to. And that's something that's not really a human quality. You know, humans believe that if they can do it, they should. That's not how it should be. Just because humans can doesn't mean they should. You know, I remember one visit to the Panama Canal, and I'm seeing this insane engineering feat, and I'm thinking, why? You know, like, imagine a world where it wasn't cut through the middle, and, you know, trade routes were different, and they were more local rather than global. You know, what would that mean? going back to the overview effect, it's that moment. It's that moment of looking at Earth and seeing that everything is encompassed and everything is interconnected, and every action involved, it will affect someone else. And I want to, so when I discovered this about 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that I wanted everything to be driven by the overview effect, and realized that actually learning about the overview effect was essentially defining what I had felt already in the past, but I didn't know that it had a term, that it was like it had a title. You know, I just thought, let's just do good, let's inspire, and let's do the best we can. But now I actually have a roadmap, and it's to create the overview effect on Earth. So, you know, eventually a lot of people will be going to space. That's happening. But I don't believe, although I appreciate it because it has a very strong and profound, there's millionaires going up to space now that are changing their mindset. So yes, send more millionaires, you know, send more people that have the resources to come back and make a change. But I want to do that on Earth. I don't really want to wait for space travel to become, you know, accessible to all. Why not do it on? I mean, look at where we are. This is enough, you know, and this has to be preserved. And so through music, through experiences, through conversations, through bringing people together, through collaborations, this is sort of my mission now. The real community is holding people accountable and really kind of moving in the same direction. And so this is what these gatherings are about, is to bring people together, to that, you know, have this understanding that if I come to this, I can't leave and just not pay attention to what just happened. And part of that is bringing people that are doing it, and the people that people can relate to, and business and arts and whatever it is that their discipline is. So sitting down with somebody in a bit of a conversation, sort of lecture, sort of interview setting, really is super powerful. We have people gather and it's almost like a fireside chat, and we do little exercises with them, and then little kind of partnering moments where you realize that these tools are effective. And it's essentially tools that put you in the state of mind in the mindset of living a life of purpose, the pursuit of happiness, and invoking action with your action and your influence.
I think that's important. I mean, you know, you were saying earlier about Peter Gabriel and his activism with Amnesty International, and I think, you know, musicians do have a voice, some obviously bigger than others, but I think it's definitely part of having a platform, having a stage, having access to people's consciousness through words. I mean, they're just such powerful things, and that's how we infiltrate, I guess, each other's lives in that way. What's the kind of, you know, moment, I suppose, where you lay down that gauntlet, or try and, you know, give that moment to someone where they want to take that baton forward and do something, make positive change with it?
I think throughout the whole experience, people have overview effect moments at different times, and I see that also often during my concerts, where I like look at the audience. The audience, by the way, I always perform in the center, and I have a 360-degree audience, all kind of sitting down with poofs as we are now. The sound is immersive. It's a sound system that is outside of that circle, pointing inward. And the goal with that is to actually see everyone, and so that everyone sees each other. It's not everyone facing in one direction and only looking at stage, which to me is absolutely archaic and boring. I'm looking around the audience and I'm seeing little moments of, wow, you know, like little moments of, oh, okay, I get it, you know. Through the concerts, there's messaging. Obviously, I speak through songs, and I talk about moments, and sort of always remind why we're here and why it is that you're feeling what you're feeling, and being grateful for it, and being very, very expressive on how grateful I am for them to allow me to take them on this journey. And those are all the little overview effect moments. At the end of the day, you know, what I often read about when I receive messages post events is that they either had a sleepless night, the guests, from how inspired they might have been, or they slept so well, and they woke up inspired. And that's it. That's that moment. Is it as profound as looking at Earth from space? No, but I want to get it there. I really want to get it there somehow. Figuring out, working the steps to really find the way to get it there. And technology is going to play a huge part eventually. I'm talking to some really incredible people doing some incredible things with technology and LED screens and things like this. My dream, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the new Sphere in Vegas that just opened. Yeah. Check it out. It's a Madison Square Garden built a like $4 billion massive ball that's cladded with high definition LED inside and out. So you basically immerse people. You drive by. The concern is that the ball is going to create the most accidents in human history because it's so insane. Yeah. But the inside, you have a stage, and everything turns into whatever environment you want to turn it into. And these, I think, are the way. That's the way performance is what I'd like to see it go. And also, something that we haven't talked about, but something that I think is super important, is that I also want to find a way to disrupt the concert industry in a way. It's a big statement, but I don't understand why. And this is the model that we've created with Habitas. Essentially, at every Habitas location, I produce a concert sponsored by Habitas. Every ticket goes to a cause. Every single penny goes to a foundation, underprivileged children, coral reef restoration, plastic recycling, plastic management, all these things. In Tulum specifically, and we have many different properties, and they focus on different aspects of that local activism. But every single penny goes to these causes, and there's no reason why American Express shouldn't be sponsoring a significant concert at a significant concert hall, and every ticket go to a foundation. And so this is sort of like I'm planting seeds, and I'm really trying to find a way, and I think it's gonna happen. Yeah. There's a moment in our history where it's unacceptable to just be greedy and make a lot of money. You have to have a purpose, and that needs to be part of your business plan. It needs to be part of your business model. And I'm hopefully the Trojan horse that's going to allow some of these companies to have that happen. It certainly is happening with Habitas, but Habitas is obviously based on this notion of, we can't just take, we have to give back. Yeah. I think that's going to have to happen at a larger scale. And so I'm really looking forward to that moment.
I think we're drawing neatly to a close, but I'm really grateful of your time today. It's really meaningful to be sitting here in amongst the olive trees having this conversation, and I wish you the best of luck with the rest of the volumes.
Thank you for having me.